The sled push is absolutely the best place where you can save time during HYROX, but it can also blow up your race, and it has blown up my race many times. So in this video, I'm going to tell you exactly how to maximize your time on the sled push while not killing yourself so that you can really excel for the rest of the race. My name is Rich Ryan. I am a two-time Elite 15 World Championships qualifier with a PR of 54.28 in HYROX Pro, 1/3 of the RMR Training coaching staff with my partner Meg Jacoby, 2024 World Champion, heard of her, and Ryan Kent, who was a 2023 major winner. So when I first started doing HYROX, this is what it looked like when I would do sled push. It was an absolute death march and still took me about 4 minutes and completely wiped me out for the next 2 minutes of the run. Now I'm consistently in the low twos and am able to stay in any race that I am engaged in while being one of the lighter competitors, only about 175 pounds when I'm in competition shape. So there are three things that have really helped me improve my sled push. It is the training, it is technique, and it is race day strategy. I'm gonna go through all three of those things so that you can skip all of the pain that I've gone through, looking like I'm absolutely going to fall to pieces on the sled push, so that you can have your best HYROX. So when we're talking about the training, there's three pieces in here that you're gonna want to address when building out your training program. It's frequency, it's structure, and it's intensity. So let's start with frequency. Like most traditional strength training like hypertrophy or powerlifting or anything for actual strength, the frequency does matter. When you go from 1 time a week to 2 times per week, you're gonna see an exponential jump in your improvement. After that, you will still see some progress, but there's a point of diminishing returns and it comes pretty quickly. There was a point where I was training the sled 4 times a week because I just became obsessed with it and I wanted to do everything I possibly could. And to me, I was like, I'm just gonna do it a bunch. And eventually I was over fatigued. It took a wear and tear on my body, especially my lower legs, my feet, my calves and Achilles took a beating. And then with adding the running on top of that, it just wasn't conducive to proper progression. Also, when I did a ton of sled push frequency, I didn't feel like I was getting a ton out of each of them in retrospect. I was kind of going through the motions, and every day I'd be like, okay, sled. And it wasn't like I was attacking the sled. I was just kind of moving the sled, which there's definitely benefit to. But one thing to keep in mind about strength training in general is that it's going to respond much better to intensity. So being able to put out the intensity that you intend is very important. So I say 2 times a week, that's the sweet spot when it comes to your sled training. That's what I do. That's what I would recommend for you to do. I don't recommend only pushing the sleds during your quality sessions, but one session I would absolutely put into place is just straight sets and reps like it's strength. So for the sets and reps, I would keep the volume under about 150 total meters. So always remember that we want to move this sled fast. So if you're finding this helpful, do me a favor, shoot this to a buddy, share this with your HYROX friend or even a coach at your gym. If you're finding this helpful, it could be helpful to your community as well. We're lifting each other up out here. So now let's talk about intensity. So it's becoming clear that in a HYROX event, the venue itself is going to matter how the sleds are going to move. The humidity, the overall heat, the age of the carpet, the age of the sleds, all these things are going to factor into how well that they move that day, unfortunately. So you're going to need to move these sleds at a different effort throughout your training. So that means adding on heavier some days, that means adding on lighter some days, making sure you're mixing this up. Just because the sled is moving faster does not mean that you're going to come out of that feeling better. It might actually be the inverse. You might feel worse because you can push it faster, so you're not getting the set breaks that you might have when it's a little bit heavier. So you need to practice and you need to be prepared. This race is standardized to a point, but we need to be prepared for the unknown that might occur on race day. And we really don't know what that's going to be like until we show up on that day. So if you're interested more in the training side of things, make sure you grab the RMR Training Guide Essentials. Down in the caption is 5 different workout styles that we put into pretty much all of our programs for ourselves and for the athletes that we coach. Proven methods that will make you better at HYROX. We talk about how to structure them and where they should go in your training. That's free down below, so make sure you're grabbing that. On to the technique. This is something that will give you really easy gains right away. If you're looking for immediate results on your sled push, changing your technique is a great way to do it. It's probably the only way we're going to get instant results from the sled push. So the first thing you want to do is place your hands forward on the poles. And this gives us the option to actually push with our arms. So too often I see people kind of wrapping their hands around the sled poles, and this is fine, but we're not going to have the option to use our arms, right? If we want everything positioned forward so that we're moving things forward, when it starts to come to the other side, we don't have that option. So we can't press ourselves forward. We're just going to have to rely on using our legs and the mass of our body to move the sled forward. But if we're talking about making up a little bit of seconds here or there, we want to use every advantage possible. So making sure your palms are facing forward away from you on those poles. The second thing is you want to see your forearms completely flush against those poles as well. Something I'll see often is people kind of turn their arms out to lean the poles against the upper part of their bicep, which can be uncomfortable. And again, doesn't give you that option to push forward with your arms. So we want to make sure everything is pushing forward and that you're flush against the actual poles themselves. This is going to be a huge change in the way that you use the hooks technique. So if you've been using it and it's just like uncomfortable or it doesn't seem like it's moving very well, change that arm position and make sure things are flush against the poles and moving forward. So the major advantage I've found with the hooks technique is that it moves your hips and your feet closer to the sled, and it just provides a little bit more force into that object, which will move it forward easier. When your hips and feet are moved backwards away from that sled, I found it's a little bit harder to get good traction from your shoes, and it's just increasing the distance between your powerful hips and legs to the actual object. So that's one thing you just can't make up for when you are pushing with your arms at your shoulders. If you need to push at your shoulders, fine, do it. But I would really give yourself the opportunity to practice this hooks method for several weeks in training just to get comfortable with it. If you give it a chance, it will definitely be better, I promise. So your stride length is also something to consider here when talking about the sled push. And really the best answer for this, which is also the least concrete, is take the steps that you need to take so that you can move as fast as possible. Kind of sounds like a duh, but you want to make sure that you are being able to accelerate into that object as quickly as possible. So if you can take longer steps and that thing moves faster, then take longer steps. If you need to take shorter steps in order for it to keep moving, then that's what you have to do. So this is something you need to play around with in your own training. I'd recommend setting up like 4x15 meters at around HYROX Pro weight and just go for time. Go as fast as you can. Go for longer strides, go for shorter strides, and see how that feels in terms of rate of perceived exertion and how it feels in terms of the actual time. Time it and see what's faster. So now we have our training, we have our technique. Now we're on to the strategy for the sled push. Again, the sled push is the place where you can make up a lot of time. So when you look at RoxOpt, you'll see that the variance between a great push and a poor push is pretty wide. So we want to maximize this as much as possible without killing ourselves later in the race. A huge mistake that I see, and it happens almost to everybody in their first couple goes at HYROX, is that they're feeling good and they want to push that sled hard. They are able to accomplish that, but by the time they get to burpee broad jumps, everything kind of comes crashing back down on them, and they're not able to express their full fitness potential because they took it out in that first third of this race. So we want to make sure we're pushing the sled as fast as we can while making sure we can execute the back half of the race. And that doesn't just come down to fitness. It comes down to execution and executing around the sled push as well. So we want to make sure that the run before the ski, the run before the sled, and the run after the sled are all very controlled. If you're able to control your effort here and express a high output on that sled, you're going to be fine. But what's really hard to do is hammering that first run, hammering the ski, hammering the second run, hammering the sled. Then everything comes back on you. You just won't be able to do it as well unless you are absolutely the best in the world and you are super conditioned to hammer this race for 60 minutes from start to back. But for most of us, that's not the case. So we want to make sure that we are taking our time in those first couple of stations and runs so that when we get to the sled, we have juice to push it. It's going to be against your nature as an athlete and a competitor to chill out on those first couple of stations and runs. But it's crucial. You want to be able to run your best race, and you will be able to make it up later in that race. So we want to have a strategy going into the sled, knowing how far we can push it, either from a quantitative part or a qualitative part, that we understand where we're going to need to rest. So I'd recommend picking a spot if you want it to be a hard metric. Be like, all right, I'm going to push it half, I'm going to push it 3/4, and then I'm going to rest for 5 seconds. Or I'm going to push it until my legs feel like they are just about ready to kind of fill up and kind of feel more blown up. And then I would rest. And having a set amount of time. 5 seconds is great. 10 seconds is also great if that's going to allow you to push fast throughout. What I wouldn't do is move off of the sled. Sometimes I'll see people push, and I've done this myself. I'll push it, and then I'll start backing away, taking my time. remain on the sled. Keep contact with that sled the full time. The intensity, the intent, and the strategy inside of the station goes a long way. So you have to stay present during the sled push and execute your plan no matter what. So those are the 3 factors when considering the sled push. Take a look at the RMR Training app if you want to learn more about our training programs here. Take a look at that essentials guide to help you structure your training and do all these things above. Take your sled push to that next level. I'll see you at that next race.